In 2011, a Florida woman dialed 911, claiming she had just found her ex-husband brutally murdered in his own home. But as investigators began to dig deeper, the truth unraveled into one of the most disturbing cases of manipulation and betrayal you'll ever hear. This wasn't just a murder. It was a story of a mother who planted a deadly idea in her daughter's head, and a daughter who followed through in the most shocking way imaginable. So the question is, was this truly the act of a desperate young woman, or the calculated plan of her manipulative mother? The nightmare began when Stephanie Hudnell walked into her ex-husband Bill's house with her teenage daughter Gwen. Within minutes, Stephanie was on the phone with 911, claiming she had just discovered Bill's lifeless body. He had been attacked while sleeping, struck more than 17 times with a heavy pickaxe. The scene was brutal, and it didn't take long for detectives to realize this wasn't some random act of violence. Right away, police noticed something odd about Stephanie. While most people in shock stumble through their words, she was strangely composed, almost rehearsed. And when both Stephanie and Gwen were taken in for questioning, investigators quickly began to notice cracks in their story. Sitting in the interrogation room, Stephanie spun a tale that sounded like it had been pulled straight out of a thriller movie. She claimed Bill had mentioned seeing a strange car parked outside his home weeks earlier, suggesting that maybe some unknown intruder had been stalking him. Then she explained that she and Gwen had borrowed Bill's truck to run errands, and when they returned, they just happened to stumble upon his body. But detectives weren't convinced. The story felt too convenient, too perfectly laid out. And Stephanie didn't stop there. She painted Bill as controlling, cold, and even abusive, trying to position him as someone people wouldn't sympathize with. What she didn't realize was that investigators had already pegged her as someone trying to shift suspicion away from herself. Meanwhile, Gwen was sitting in a separate room, and her story matched her mother's word for word. Almost too perfectly. Detectives decided to put her to the test with a polygraph. The results? She failed miserably. That's when the tone shifted. Detectives leaned in and told Gwen point blank, "There's no doubt in my mind you did this." The pressure was too much, and Gwen cracked. She confessed that she had killed her father while he slept. Her reasoning? She said her family was drowning financially. Their power was about to be shut off. They had no money left, and her father had recently received a $6,000 settlement. Out of that, he had only given them $400. In Gwen's mind, she felt cornered. She admitted she saw the axe and felt like she had no choice but to act. This was no robbery gone wrong. This was a desperate act fueled by financial stress, and possibly something much darker, her mother's influence. Detectives wanted to see what would happen if mother and daughter faced each other. So, they placed Stephanie and Gwen in the same interrogation room. Gwen immediately broke down and admitted, "He knows what I did." Stephanie, however, put on an award-worthy performance of shock. She insisted Gwen had never told her anything, pretending to be blindsided by the confession. But detectives weren't buying it. The mother-daughter duo had clearly rehearsed their stories, and now those stories were falling apart in real time. Once separated again, detectives pushed harder on Stephanie. At first, she stuck to her claim that Gwen had only confessed randomly after the fact, but under pressure she started letting small truths slip. First, she admitted Gwen was furious at her father for refusing to share money. Then she admitted she burned Gwen's bloody clothes in the backyard after the murder. Finally, Stephanie acknowledged something even more damning. She and Gwen had openly discussed how Bill's death would mean Social Security benefits that could help them financially. She recalled Gwen saying, "I can take care of this." And instead of shutting her down, Stephanie let the idea grow. She even drove her daughter to Bill's home that night, essentially delivering her to commit the act. At this point, investigators didn't just see Gwen as a killer. They saw Stephanie as the manipulator who orchestrated it all. Both women were arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that while Gwen swung the axe, Stephanie had carefully planted the motive and stood by as her daughter destroyed two lives at once, Bill's and her own. Eventually, both Stephanie and Gwen agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder, avoiding the possibility of life without parole. Each was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In the end, Stephanie, who had lived off others her whole life and refused to hold a job, now spends her years living off the state. Gwen, manipulated by the very person who should have protected her, will grow old behind bars. This case leaves us with an unsettling question. Was Gwen just a cold-blooded killer? Or was she as much a victim as her father, manipulated by a mother who should have protected her instead of pushing her toward violence? One thing's certain, the interrogation footage from this case shows just how easily lies can crumble, and how manipulation within a family can destroy everyone involved. But what do you think? Did both women get the justice they deserved? Or was Gwen's punishment too harsh given the control her mother had over her? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this case shocked you, just wait until you hear about another mother who pushed her own daughter into murder. A story even darker than this one.